start them in October? Do you start them in November? Do you start them in December? And what sort of riding and what sort of goals do you look for them in that early preparatory season as they go in? And what are some of the, and in a fairly simple way, the techniques? Do you do a lot of 20-minute intervals? Do you do?
Sure.
I just read the blog from Frederick Erickson, that monster Swede.
Yeah.
Well, you guys should get that. It's a good one, that guy. He's strong, that guy. Holy, and he's an exercise physiologist too. He's very smart. I was reading his blog about his training, and it's absolutely frightening. It's like 7 hours with 20-minute sessions plus intervals. It's sort of frightening. Yeah. So to get an idea of what these guys do,
sure,
the rhythms of the season.
I'll kind of compare and contrast that, what our guys do versus what the average cyclist might expect. And I think that the first thing that we've kind of thrown out as an organization is the notion that you have to do certain things at certain times of year. I think that mentality is fairly difficult because it doesn't necessarily work with real life, right? And even our guys go through very seasonal responses, meaning that when it's cold out and there's not a lot of light, they're just not as motivated, right? And so in theory, if things make sense to do, but they don't practically work, then we just try to avoid that and try not to beat our guys up over that fact. There are certainly parts of the year where we have to chase the sun, and we just have to get out there, and usually that time of year for most of our guys is December or January. And so I would say for the guys who want to perform early season, especially the classics guys, they have to be training a lot of volume by the time December rolls around. And if they don't, they just don't have the fitness, they just don't have the time. For the guys who want to do well in the tour, they can pretty much open up in January, February, and still do pretty well and have a really good rest of the season. The guys who begin that process now in March or so, they'll have a good September, October, and they'll be on track for, say, the World Championships. That being said, I think that my general schema for the guys is as follows. The first and most important thing is they just need to be able to get the time on the bicycle. And time on the bicycle by itself changes someone's fitness. And that you have to kind of look at the system as the human machine being very intelligent and the human machine actually knowing what it needs to get done. And that your body will never do what it's not capable of doing. And so at the very, very simplest level, I'll just say to the guys, hey, it's time to just get on the bicycle and just start doing the miles, right? And that's what our training camp in Silver City is all about, is just doing the mileage, getting those 4 to 6 hour days in for our guys. The next set of that for me is, I think of it in terms of skill set. So we think about simple skills and drills, the types of pace lines that we do, the cadence drills, the tempo changes, or the rhythm changes, right? So we're not even dealing with intensity yet, and now we're having the guys do different types of rotations. We're having them get on their time trial bicycles a lot. We're having them do a lot of team time trial work, but it's all at a fairly easy, steady state type of pace. The guys eventually will say, hey, I think we can handle more, that this isn't tiring me, or I'm not fatigued, or things look pretty good. And then the next approach we'll do is we'll just start talking about simple, I don't tend to think about things in terms of lactate threshold, at least not with my guys, right? We think about things in 2 ways. We think about things in terms of distance. So we'll talk about 20-minute intervals or 30-minute intervals or 10-minute intervals, right? We'll talk about whether those intervals are steady or not steady, right? And essentially what we'll do is we'll first introduce longer climbing type intervals. We'll do them steady, and then over time, this might be from January into the race season, we'll go from having them be steady to having them negative split those climbs or those intervals. So first half easy, second half harder. Then we'll go to what we call quarters. We'll actually cut them into quarters, and they'll go, easy, hard, easy, hard, easy, hard. Then we'll go into eighths, and then we'll just, eventually by the time we get into the training year, we'll talk about riding the terrain. So we'll pick courses and we'll decide certain segments that will be harder, certain segments that will be easy. At this point, I'm usually with them on the road on a scooter. This is in Europe, and usually what I'll do is I'll just create race simulations, race scenarios. And by that time, our whole entire basic language becomes time in certain intensity zones. But we don't use lactate threshold. We talk about it in usually 2 watt per kg increments. So 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, and then 8 and above. And so we'll talk about how much 4 to 6 watt per kg time we need, or how much 6 to 8 watt per kg time we need. On average, the peloton in the Tour de France, when it climbs at 5 watts per kilogram. Almost always for the last 4 or 5 years that I've watched the Tour or observed the Tour. When you're in the first group and the peloton is rolling and you're sitting in, you're rolling at 5 watts per kg. And so what I know from my guys, if they can't just do at least 4 or 5 climbs lasting 30 minutes to 45 minutes over the course of a 6-hour day at 5 watts per kg, they're not making first group. And so oftentimes we'll just run these simulations. We have this great loop in the Pyrenees up in an area called Percherdo. It's a ski resort called La Molina, and it's about a 35, 40-minute climb, and then the descent and all that takes, the whole loop takes about an hour. And as we get close to the Tour de France, all we'll do is we'll just do 6 laps, and we'll just race each lap against the scooter, and it's just kind of a last man standing scenario, right?
And then they get the ball at the end.